You're listening to The Extraction, conversations on the systems and strategies behind dental practice growth with Colin Ambler and Kyle Bergman. Hey everyone, welcome back to The Extraction podcast. My name is Kyle and I am here with my co-host, co-founder, and CEO of Team Care, Colin. We are joined today by Dr. Anushka, the co-founder and co-CEO at Areo Dental Group. And we have a great podcast for you today. We're going to learn about the genesis of not only Areo, but Dr. Anushka's career into dentistry. We talk about incentives, we talk about king cobras, and we talk about really what it takes behind the scenes to get to a 8 practice little monster that's out in the Chicago area. So Dr. Anushka, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. And please send your regards to your husband, who is co-founder and co-CEO. So you're both co-CEO. I love that. To start for our listeners, can you give us the origin story first of Dr. Anushka, how you got into dentistry, and then how that matriculated into Areo?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to dive into it. I graduated dental school. I had 3 associateships after I graduated. And my husband, Abhishek, also a dentist, he was wrapping up his schooling at NYU, College of Dentistry. I was already in Chicago. And when he moved over here, we were dating at the time. He moved over to Chicago and I was kind of getting a little antsy. I'd been practicing for 3 years and I was like, I'm getting a little bit restless and I kind of want to have my own thing. He got a great job. He was there for a year before, again, I pressured him. I said, I'm done with this. I've got to have my own thing. So he reluctantly, we started looking for a practice. We found a practice that was owned by a dentist who probably should have sold a few years before. And we decided to kind of buy that practice, renovate it. And in the first year, we took it to about $1 million. But within 6 months, we kind of got tired of seeing each other every single day. So we were like, okay, let's go look for a second practice. And every year since then, we've kind of added a practice. We didn't realize that necessarily we were going to go down this path of being multi-practice owners. But I think every practice we added, it was just so exciting to see it grow and see the impact we could have on patients, on team members, and kind of be as much as possible. We're trying to be a very positive force in the industry. That's really where our passion lies. Maybe 2 years ago, we branded as Areo Dental, and that's kind of like our employee facing brand, but our practices are non-branded. And that's where we stand today.
Amazing. I'm sure Colin is chomping at the bit for some questions because there's so many similarities, I think, in the growth story that you and your husband have, and also Colin and his wife, also known as the co-founder of Team Care and of our in-house practice outside of Philly. So you acquire this practice that's doing roughly $2K a year. You take it to $1 million in less than 12 months. Presumably, there had to be 1 or 2 things that accounted for maybe 80% of that growth. And if there was, what were they?
That is a great question. If I can really pinpoint it, the first thing was technology. I know we talk a lot about technology. I'm not talking like the CT machine or the fancy scanner. It's more putting in really intraoral cameras. I think that was a huge portion of it because I know, and this is a discussion we have a lot, even with kind of our new grads or our dental assistants. They're like, where the X-rays are there, patients can't read X-rays. So for us, it was all about putting that technology in where we can make things more efficient, move faster, time is money, every minute counts, and having those intraoral photos. And the second thing was putting ourselves through training on case acceptance and on leadership. It's one of the things I see a lot is people say, well, I'm going to upskill. I'm going to have more clinical skills. That's a huge portion of it. But if you can't communicate with your patient and educate them, there's no point. You can do every procedure on earth. You're never going to get acceptance.
Yeah, I love talking about case acceptance. We built so much technology in that area because I don't think that practice management software is doing nearly a good enough job in tracking it, front desk, et cetera. Tell me more about, you've done your previous associateships and now you're an owner. And I guess you'd already figured out how to produce, I would imagine, right? You're an associate, you've been in 3 different practices. You personally know how to produce. You go from 200 to 800. Are you guys just star producers or like, tell me where you had a different mentality and put the owner's hat on in the practice? And what are the changes in that first year? That's a remarkable for first year. It's like you 5x a business in 1 year. It sounds easy. It sounds like, oh, IOPs. But tell me more. What did that practice do in the second year? Was it easy, low hanging fruit the first year? I think we'd love to dive into maybe some of the magic that you've come to find with managing a team and growing this beyond a single producer, maybe.
Yeah, going back to kind of the beginning of your question, I actually was not. I was a good producer in Medicaid practices. I had worked a lot in Medicaid practices. So when we first started, we took Medicaid and then I was okay. And then we decided one day to cold turkey cut Medicaid. And that's where I struggle. I'll be very honest. Because with Medicaid, patients come in, a lot of things are covered. You just do the treatment. I was very good at, I could do the full mouth fillings. That's kind of my thing. Is full mouth fillings, full mouth crowns. I can do all of that, but that's only as good as Medicaid could cover it. When we switched to PPO fee for service, all of a sudden I had to educate the patient. And that's something that, again, I see a lot of new grads don't really seem to understand that piece. So I had to go get my self-training. And that's when I learned how to become a better producer.
What was the moment when you dropped Medicaid, but
Yeah.
then was there a period there when you were like, "Hey, the tricks I do for Medicaid to get patients to say yes aren't working for these PPO patients." Was there an aha moment when you were like, "I gotta change what I'm doing here?"
Absolutely. I think it came down to when we actually started tracking our production. Again, with Medicaid, it's just a lot simpler, but then you're also getting much lower fees, right? So it's much easier to get someone to say yes to something when it's free versus
Yeah.
now they have to pull something out of their pocket. Tracking production, I noticed when I was working in Medicaid practices, everywhere I was kind of like their star producer because it was just easy to get the yes. As soon as I had to get people to pull their wallets out and I started tracking my production, I'm like, oh my goodness, this has gone down. And that was kind of my aha moment is like patients are walking out without getting the treatment. And that's when I realized I had to make a change.
So and when you say tracking production, production is the final treatment is delivered, which is kind of downstream of case acceptance, right?
Correct.
Like you do case acceptance, and that's when you do production. And so when you were doing Medicaid, you were earning and producing at a good level. And then you went into the PPO world and
Mhm.
production was going down. And you're like, oh crap, we got to make a change. We just bought this practice. Now we got bills and stuff that we didn't think about. Where'd your journey go next with going into case acceptance?
Yeah, we did a lot of clinical training. I think between the two of us, we probably did 200 hours of CE in the first couple of years that we were out owning our own practice. But to be very frank, case acceptance wasn't even on my radar until a few years ago. It was all just production. And that's something when I was an associate, nobody tracked any of that for me. There was no tracking on. I don't remember a single person coming to me and talking to me about my case acceptance, about my production, any of those metrics really. So it was all kind of brand new to us. And back then, the only thing I knew was production. So we did a lot of clinical upskilling. We went to actually LVI in Las Vegas, and there we met a consultant who was part of that. And she was wonderful. She was very instrumental in kind of helping us figure out how to add a laser, how to start tracking some of these things. And really, she's the one that said, turn off the Medicaid. It's just gonna make you a lot more productive. And she was absolutely right, although in the moment it was scary. But really, it's over time that we've developed the sophistication as far as kind of looking at those metrics and tracking those.
Okay, so let's talk some metrics. What do you guys track, and what's good about it? And I also am curious. You said something that made me go towards like this mentorship world, where as a young associate, you were like, nobody was ever talking to me about this stuff. And so I'm wondering now, in your elevated, sophisticated, systematized world that is metrics oriented, are you kind of paying it forward? And is this part of the workflow in your office that you're actively talking to your associates and guiding them about their case acceptance in a way that you never had?
Absolutely. I think for us, that's crucial, right? Because I didn't have any insight. And to be fair, I'm not sure if the people I worked for had much insight into it. They kind of like just tracked overall production. But like you said, that's a lagging indicator. We've kind of pushed our company into leading indicators, which is what you're discussing. We absolutely do track all of those. In fact, every department, we have hygienists, practice leaders, doctors. Every department has their own metrics that they need to track. But then on top of that, as a company, we run on EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System, and we have an L10 once a week. So with our leadership team, we go through certain metrics, which would include things like, of course, we track production and collections. It's very important. But we also track case acceptance, follow-ups on calls, call answer rate. I think are some of the most important metrics that we track as a company.
Okay. And so cases accepted is our spreadsheet system, or you use something else to do it? I mean, you guys have How many locations do you have total?
We're adding an eighth shortly.
This is a big, impressive operation. I'd imagine that you're deploying systems universally standardized for the most part
So
across those locations.
everything is standardized.
Yeah. So to me, if you're going to do that, systems need to be pretty clean, efficient. And tell us what's the mechanism? Is it a spreadsheet system or something else?
No, actually, we kind of move away from spreadsheets as much as possible. We've been using Jarvis. It's kind of like a back end. It extracts all the information from our medical records. And we're moving on to a different company, though, called Clarify, which kind of does a similar thing, but I think at a higher level. So that's really how we extract the information. We give all of our team members, from every department, has access to that so they can kind of look at their own metrics and figure out where they can improve on their own. Instead of us just telling them you should do this better, we're telling them, you pull it, this is the industry standard. Where do you think you need help to get?
Dr. Anushka, I have a question about that. What you just said makes so much sense in theory. And it sounds like in practice for you, you have a lot of team members who are motivated to look at their numbers and use that as leverage to become a better output system for the owners.
Mhm.
But part of the magic with team care is that we often find that a lot of staff don't care about their numbers or, like, okay, great. Like we have transparency, but we need some sort of carrot as well. And so are you and your husband incredible at identifying talent that is intrinsically motivated to work off of numbers, or is there something else that's motivating them to want to respond to what they're seeing?
Yeah, I think one of the things we realized over time, and it's taken us a lot of time to understand this, is it's actually both pieces. One of the pieces is, of course, we incentivize our practice leaders, right? Everybody likes more money. This is how you get more money. So that's a big part of it. But I think the bigger part really is we look at skill versus will. If somebody has skill, but they have no will, that's not someone that we want in our company. And also, our core values are very important to us. So we really do hire and let go of people based on those core values. And the conclusion we've come to is it takes a very, very strong practice leader. We don't call them managers because we want them to do both and lead the practice forward. It takes a strong practice leader. We've realized even with a doctor who's a new grad who may not know as much, that strong practice leader really helps move that practice forward. So we are lucky in that all of our practice leaders, knock on wood, understand the vision and they understand the importance of tracking these KPIs.
So I'm curious with software solutions, there's a lot of PMS integration stuff. I've always found in my own that there's sort of some omissions in that the standard practice management software, for example, doesn't represent the front desk people in case acceptance. It's like you have ledgers, you have providers, things get tracked through hygienist and doctor, dollars and cents production, things like that, but there's a gap with assistants and front desk. And so, are you guys, have you found a way to represent those people and back them with metrics? And tell me about it.
Yeah, that's a great question. For dental assistants, I think it's always a little bit of a difficult thing to track.
Yeah, yeah. Put them in a different category. Front desk, though, I'm very
Yeah.
passionate about because, like, they're really pushing the business,
There.
And when I first got into it myself, I was like, yeah, there's no reporting on any of these people. Like, how do you know what's going on? So I know that my inspiration in team care came a lot from that place, but I'm curious how you found the same.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you, right? Here's the thing. At the end of the day, we look at the practice leader as the one who's kind of holding everybody accountable. But one of the big metrics that we have for our we call them patient care ambassadors, is follow-up rate. And, case acceptance is one of those things that I think it's very hard to track on an individual basis, right? We can see what the doctor's doing, we can see what the practice is doing, but it's very hard to kind of split it up into practice leader and patient care ambassador. So that's where we're trying to figure out how to tweak that part. And it sounds like team care maybe has something to do with that, to solve that.
Yes. I mean, yes, we will talk about that certainly because I think I've gone farther down this road than any man has gone before to go to the lengths to track this stuff. And I think it's been really important for us, like you said, to be able to quantify these things that were otherwise intangible. And I really feel passionate that these front desk people are in this role where they're kind of a sale. So I'm going to pause for the listeners out there. Dr. Anushka is also participating in the best business school program in the world at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, also my alma mater. This is where MBA programs build dental champions, let's just say. And so back to case acceptance, I was kind of always frustrated by this idea that front desk people, they're really, if I look at it, they're in a sales role where they're responsible for generating and closing hundreds of thousands of dollars of business. And it's kind of directly within their control. Yes, they have to work closely with the doctor and this and that. But like you said, there's follow-up calls. There's lots of opportunities out there. And if they do it, it can be a very successful outcome for the business. If they don't, there's no money. And so it always frustrated me that in every dental practice across America, mostly, everyone's on an hourly rate. And if you step outside the dental world and you go into big business, you would never, ever, ever find a sales role that is paid hourly, like never. And so that's really where we kind of found that, well, if we have this limiting factor of, well, case acceptance is hard to track for front desk, but how else can we measure these people in a sales performance role? It's like so much of the meter stick of a front desk person is kind of on case acceptance of like, well, what did the cases that I presented result in? What about the follow-up calls that I made? Did they result in like successful business, outcome or not? So tracking case acceptance and rolling that into commission plans for front desk has been the core of what team care at that kind of role has been. And so I'd love to talk about that. And I'm wondering if you've had any issues or wants or needs with trying to get this information to your front desk. Are you frustrated by it? Is it something that like you feel like is really important, or are you guys thriving without it?
No, I absolutely think it's important, right? I think everybody has to have KPIs that they should be able to track, not just at a practice level. That's why we kind of moved on, right? The company we were using, we've moved on to a different company that I think is going to do amazing things personally. And I'm hoping that'll also help with what we're trying to do.
Okay, cool. Another topic that we talk about often is incentives. And so just curious, what models have you tried and failed or tried and succeeded with? Or are you a believer in incentives or not a believer?
I always think about the story when someone asks me about incentives. And I don't know if it's true or not, but back in British India, when the British had taken control of India, they had a problem with king cobras. So what they did was they went to the population and said, for every head of a king cobra you bring to us, we will give you money for that. And what happened was some people got smart and they started breeding king cobras. And then they started killing them, bringing their heads to them. So they got incentives. And when the British kind of wisened up to it, they said, okay, no more incentives for this. Well, the population had already created all these king cobras. They'd already bred them. So they had these thousands of king cobras. I said, well, I'm not going to get money for them anymore. So they just released them. And whenever we put in a new incentive, that's the story I think about. So yes, we've had incentive plans that I think have failed where, one example is beyond a certain point, after we kind of hit a certain revenue, we would incentivize our team and the whole team would get an incentive, but there wasn't really much structure to it, like who's getting what, why are they getting it. It's not like I personally did this, so I'm getting this incentive. And that's why I think that's a big piece of why it wasn't working. Now we have incentives for Google reviews for the practice as a whole. And we have incentives for our practice leaders. And of course, for doctors, to me, the incentive is you get to make so much money
Percentage of production.
just
Yeah.
is, right? But, that's something we're always thinking about is how do we make it better? And I really like the idea of kind of gamifying, as you said, with team care, gamifying the system.
Yeah, I think it's an ongoing quest. I think that I love the cautionary tale of the king cobras. And I think that there's a lot of practice owners out there that feel like that has happened and there's like a big risk to it. And I think there can be. I've seen it myself too. But I think if you go on the other end of the spectrum and have just an unincentivized world where there's no motivation, there's no driving, or there's no earnings upside, then that's not a solution either. And so we're continually on this quest to find this like sweet spot of dental team incentives that work. And so I think my time is cut here, but for another episode, we'll add it in.
Well, there's one thing that I wanted to dig just a little bit deeper for a couple of minutes on. You mentioned that you incentivize off of Google reviews, Dr. Anushka. So at your practice, you give some sort of monetary bonus based off of a Google review. And let's say that I know that a patient just gave a 5-star Google review and I wasn't mentioned in that review, but I know that I was most likely instrumental in that 5-star review being delivered. How are you going to know to incentivize me, or does that 5-star review get bonus to everyone, whether or not they were actually involved with that patient?
Yeah, so here's the mentality behind it, right? Have the practice as a whole work together to get the review. Because what we find is that sometimes the person in, let's say the dental assistant, they might forget. They're getting busy, right? So if they forget to mention it because they have to run to the next patient, I don't want that patient to just walk out because that person now thinks I'm not going to be able to get money anyway. And I know that things fall through in a dental practice. So we found that it actually works very well. And we've actually tweaked it a little bit in a couple of practices where we found exactly what you're stating, where people were feeling like as the practice, they weren't really working together as well. So then we picked one person and said, you're in charge of reviews. And that tended to work very, very well, even if they weren't mentioned in it. Open to all kinds of suggestions, as far as mentioning, but I know we've tried that in the past and people kind of fight over it that, well, I'm the one that brought it up and I didn't. What if there are 5 people mentioned in the review? Then who gets the money? So that's where we kind of got into a little bit of stickiness.
Now, you answered it and really described the tension perfectly. It's like fitting a square peg into a round hole. And at Team Care, we asked, what if there was a way that you could actually know who was involved with that patient's experience? And we actually created that. And when I say we, I mean Colin. And I'm going to share my screen right now and show you exactly what I mean. So we also offer Google review incentives. And when you use Team Care for checkouts, and we look at a person that gave a 5-star review, we can see the providers that were involved with that person's experience and who the patient was. And so now, and also every time someone leaves their Google review, an email gets sent out to everyone, not only that was involved with that review, but everyone at the practice. So everyone can celebrate in it, but the people that were actually literally helping that patient are bonused on it appropriately.
Nice,
So
that's
I
great.
guess that's another Booth alum that's doing great things in the world of dentistry.
Yeah.
Dental champions.
Dental champions. But I would be remiss to just mention that I believe Dr. Raj, Dr. Nushka's partner in crime, went to NYU, which also happens to be my alma mater. So I think that we're doing good things in the world as well. Anyways, Dr. Anushka, thank you so much for joining us on the pod. It was great to have you. If anyone is really excited about what you're doing, can they find you? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to find me. It's just
Awesome.
my name.
All right, cool. We will include your LinkedIn in the show notes. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you for listening to The Extraction with Colin Ambler and Kyle Bergman. Read episode notes and transcripts at teamcaredental.com.